Formula 1 is looking at changing the formula up again. Why? Well, nobody knows. But there's this look at changing things up for 2027 with the first bits of the puzzle clicking into place through 2026. But all this discussion has got people saying the same thing. Stop messing with it. The current format will remain the same. There'll be sprint races at a select few rounds, with the 2025 sprint calendar being China, Miami, Spa, Austin, Interlagos and Qatar. That's a total of 6 sprint races. But Formula 1 is looking at increasing this format further because, again, reasons. And the sprint race was quite controversial when it came in to start with. So why was sprint racing introduced? The official F1 website said it was to provide more bang for your buck. Those that maybe didn't want to or couldn't afford a Sunday ticket could instead go on the Saturday, the day of a sprint race, and watch the sprint race instead. Or for those that did go for the whole weekend, they got to see more racing. The F1 website goes as far as to say that the sprint format guarantees meaningful action every single day, because there's grid positions at stake for it. Is that actually the case though? Because when you think about it, you do in theory see more competition. A standard race weekend has the first 2 practice sessions on Fridays, a third session on Saturday morning, qualifying on Saturday afternoon, and then the race on the Sunday. The way it's been done for, well, forever. Although the amount of practice sessions has changed over the years, because there was up to 4 practice sessions at one point, with a pre-race warm-up session on Sunday morning. Now, in this era of cost-cutting and testing bans, this seems to be the right amount. But on a sprint weekend, there is just the one free practice session on Friday before sprint qualifying, which is on Saturday, and that functions in the same way the regular qualifying sessions do. 20 cars go out in the first session, 15 in the second, 10 in the third. Then on Saturday afternoon, they go out for qualifying for the race proper. So in theory, it does work, because now you have fewer practice sessions. You've got 1 practice session, 2 qualifying sessions, and 2 races. In terms of a competition, there's enough going on. And like I said, these races did attract a lot of criticism when they first came in 2021. The G word was thrown around a lot. Gimmick. It's a made-for-television spectacle, and I use the term incredibly lightly. In the early days of sprint racing, the result of the sprint race set the grid, so there was at least the potential for overtaking and racing to be done, because a bad sprint qualifying session could lead to some of the faster cars and drivers making moves for a better starting position for the main race. And that does make sense on paper, but now with the sprint and feature races having their own separate qualifying sessions, some are saying that it A, means that the back of the grid teams are just going to use it as an extra practice session, and B, other teams might just turn the engines down a bit to save on the stress to avoid eating into the cost caps and the engine pools. Oh, and not wanting to damage cars either, because when you think about it, the laps contested in the sprint races will add up to about 2 full Grand Prix anyway. So what's going to change into 2026 before 2027? That's a good question. I'll tell you. It will still be 6 races in 2026, but the locations will change. The actual format can't change until 2027 because firstly, the teams need to agree on it, and secondly, there's the new regulations for the cars and the engines. So the FIA and Formula 1 want to keep things somewhat the same to allow the teams to get bedded in, without adding extra things that will distract from that. Which is fine, I can understand that. It's, well, look at where they're going to be racing next year. Shanghai and Miami will keep their spots in the early part of the season, but after that, everything has changed. Silverstone, Montreal, Zandvoort and Singapore will host the rest. And some are going to say, where's Spa and where's Brazil? They're not there, clearly. Sao Paulo or Interlagos is a fantastic track for racing, so that could stay. But as somebody said in the comments section on one article that I've read for this, we had a sprint race at Spa this year, and why it's brought up as a great track for overtaking remains a mystery, because all the races there with this generation of cars has been dreadful. Now there is the new generation of cars coming for next year, but even then people are still having doubts. The other part about this is that the Canadian Grand Prix in 2026 is going to clash with the Indy 500, even more so because both races are in the same time zone, so maybe they've added the sprint race in to try and keep people in Montreal and stop them from watching the Indy 500. I'm still going to watch both. The other questions coming up surround why the hell we've got one at Zandvoort and another at Singapore. Zandvoort might have been done because it's the last time Formula 1 will race in the Netherlands for some time, and in the last 4 and a bit years they've been racing at Zandvoort, the racing hasn't exactly been great. So a sprint race might not have the effect that they want. And Singapore is the same. It's not exactly a racer's track, but at least Silverstone makes up for it. Now you might hate the flatness of Silverstone, but it constantly provides some great racing, even with these tanks that are modern Formula 1 cars. British bias, innit? And a lot of people seem to be of the opinion that dropping Brazil for Singapore and or Zandvoort is insanity. They might as well have added another sprint race at the Hungaroring, and the Hungaroring was rubbish for racing when the cars were smaller, so I don't know about now. It's alleged that event organisers have to pay something in the region of an extra $3 million if they want to host a sprint. Now Singapore can pay that easily, as can Qatar and others, so for some races it's a no-brainer. But the amount of sprint races has gone up from 3 to 6, and as mentioned earlier, in 2027 it could go up to as many as 12. That means half of the races on the calendar will be sprints, but there are still some concerns surrounding all of this. One concern is that it's even more work for those who put the cars together and get them race ready. And I know that there's this myth that mechanics and engineers get paid loads of money every year to see the world, but if you actually talk to an engineer that has recently dropped out of working in Formula 1, they'll laugh in your face. Some people working in the paddock are starting to skip more races because 24 races and all of that travelling and jet lag and so on adds up. And Formula 1 does have rules regarding hours and has curfews in place to protect the workers, but there are times when those things have to be broken to get a car ready that's been crashed, or worse still, crashed into. A team spending all night rebuilding a car because of somebody else's pro gamer move. And actually, while I'm on the subject of that, with Formula 1 saying all this stuff about carbon neutral and green and everything else, piling more and more and more and more on seems just, well, counterproductive. Okay, sure, the teams will run the amount of laps in practice that they would in a sprint race, but to the normal person looking in, they'll see more races and go, but hang on, didn't you say, what's the point? But even then, 24 races a season. It sounds utterly ridiculous. But what about NASCAR? And, you know, we've covered all that in a dedicated video, doing that. When did I do that? 2022? 3? I was in the old flat when I did that. But either way, NASCAR is, for the most part, all in one country and has smaller teams and smaller budgets. They can do it. It's a lot of logistical work, but they can do it. Formula 1, meanwhile, is jetting off all over the world, to Australia, the Middle East, North America, South America, wherever. And it makes zero sense adding and adding and adding when you're trying to balance the CO2 off or reduce it. Saying that, the V8 talks have kicked off again, haven't they? It's funny that these talks tend to kick off when they come up with some absolutely insane idea. It just seems like a distraction to me. But aside from the health and well-being of those that work in the sport, Formula 1 has started tabling some ideas that the fans simply just do not want. Reverse grids being one of them. And this is something that already exists in other forms of motorsport such as Formula 3, Formula 2 and the British Touring Car Championship. And the BTCC has its own version of the reverse grid system, and that is because of the 3-race format that the BTCC runs. In that series, Saturday qualifying sets the grid for race 1, and the grid for race 2 is set by the results of race 1. After race 2, there's a random draw, where anybody from 6th down to 12th could get pole if their race 2 finishing position is drawn. If 6th is pulled out, 6th to pole is reversed. If 12 is drawn, 12th to 1st is reversed. It means the winner of race 2 could start anywhere between 6th and 12th depending on which number is pulled out. But this format isn't without its critics, because last year Jake Hill just happened to pull the exact number he needed to get himself a good starting position out of the bowl, bag, whatever you want to call it. There's also allegations of it being convenient when the person in title contention gets an advantage because of their number being pulled out. It's, literally luck of the draw. There's no conspiracy. The Barrys getting angry on Facebook need to have a bit of a grow up. While Formula 1 isn't going to go that far because admittedly it can be a bit confusing, they might just reverse the top 10 instead. And people don't really want that either. But you can understand why Formula 1 wants to do it. They want more on-track action. Verstappen getting pole in the sprint would mean him going to the tail end of the top 10, and Verstappen coming through the field in the main race is good for TV. So is those two McLarens doing the same thing, especially with some of the moves that Oscar has pulled off this year. The thing is, it's going to feel manufactured for a lot of people, especially if they're just going to dump the fastest guys to the back each time. Some would say that the fastest should stay at the front, the positions they've earned, for want of a better phrase. But another thing that came up during the Italian Grand Prix weekend was the prospect of Formula 1 shrinking the actual feature races as well, and having a sprint and feature that are just very short and, well, I think they want them to be quite frenetic, but that would just be carnage. Currently, the maximum distance an F1 race can be is 305 kilometers or 198.5 miles. That's why some circuits such as Austria and Monaco have higher lap counts, while longer circuits like Spa have shorter lap counts. So to figure out how long a race is going to be, you just divide 305 by the length of the track in kilometers, and that should give you a ballpark of where it is. So Interlagos, for example, is 4.309 kilometers long. So divide 305 by 4.309 and you get 70.78. Round it up, that gives you 71 laps. The 2024 distance? 71 laps. Although they actually only ran 69 because of the chaos that was happening in the wet. Now admittedly, that's longer than 305 kilometers, but you get the picture. But Stefano Domenicali, the current Formula 1 commercial rights boss, or New Bernie as I like to call him, was hinting that Formula 1 could shrink down the amount of racing laps. His reasoning? Fans are showing more interest in highlight packages, and it makes sense to Formula 1 to shrink down the amount of laps to draw in the demographic of people that prefer the short form stuff. And critics have been slamming this, saying that Formula 1 is trying to sell out to those with short attention spans. But one thing to consider here, and we'll get back to this point in a moment, is that the highlights on YouTube are free. If you want to watch it live, like everything else, you've got to pay for it. But at the same time, if you're forking out how bloody much for Sky Sports every month, you're going to want the longest races possible, not the shortest. But I have to make this point abundantly clear to everybody, because at no point did Domenicali say that he actually wanted this to happen. It was only something that had been tabled as a point of discussion. Domenicali told the Italian media, "There's also the issue of the length of the competitions. We believe it's a bit too long for young people. We're seeing on many of our channels that highlights are very popular. Maybe for us who were born with this format, it's fine as it is, but there's a large segment of the audience that only wants to see the highlights. Today, everything is going very well, but precisely for this reason, we mustn't rest on our laurels but think about what the next step will be." And as the race noticed, the phrase "we must not rest on our laurels" has been used several times by Domenicali in the past, because he's trying to avoid Formula 1 becoming a series that does things for the simple reason of, that's the way we've done it. We've done it this way since 19 whenever, why should we change it? But the suggestions put forward, like shorter distances and reverse grids, might have been deliberately worded as such to see what the reaction will be. They told the world what they were thinking, without actually telling the world what they were thinking. And as some long-time viewers might have picked up over the years, I love football as well as, and as much as, motor racing. And snooker, for that matter. And I've seen some pretty boring 0-0 draws in football, the same way I've seen some really dull Formula 1 races. And Verstappen said pretty much the same thing. And Alonso also said something similar. He said, "When I sit in front of the TV, I'm not watching the full 90 minutes fully concentrated. I go to the kitchen and come back. But nobody is talking about having 60-minute football matches or something like that. So it's a problem of society and the kids, not the sport. So the change is probably not needed." But at the same time, Alonso is the oldest on the grid and of a different generation. So is this just old man yelling at clouds? And while I'm on the subject, and I'll keep this very brief because I know a lot of people don't like the football stuff, back in the 90s on Channel 4 there was a program called Football Italia. It was live Italian football for free on Channel 4. So there was a time where Italian football, Serie A, the Italian Premier League, was more accessible than the Premier League. And this was also at a time when Italian football had some absolute ballers on the pitch. Alessandro Del Piero, Gaza, Gabriel Batistuta. It was glorious. But the team bosses don't seem to be too happy about this proposal, whatever you want to call it, about shorter races. They don't think that short bursts of entertainment are the answer, because some of the tracks that Formula 1 goes to don't necessarily lean towards absolutely epic racing, the kind that you'd see in the BTCC at its absolute best. But at the same time, as John Noble at the race pointed out, the younger generation is fully capable of binging the latest series of Reacher or spending hours grinding on a video game, or listening to Joe Rogan's hour-long podcasts. So the whole attention span argument doesn't really work. The problem might actually be that the younger demographic simply doesn't have the disposable income to spend on paywalled sport. So to go back to what Domenicali said, people aren't necessarily watching this stuff on YouTube because they want to watch the highlights. It's that the highlights on YouTube are their only way of watching Formula 1. The other part of this, as one comment here says, is that Formula 1 is still, despite this constant push to grow it, an incredibly niche sport. It's not as accessible as football, rugby, athletics, tennis, or even golf. The casual fan will want to know what happens and watch the highlights, and the highlights are actually quite useful because it cuts out all the hugely unnecessary Sky Sports preamble and build-up, and that's a problem that Sky Sports has had for years, even before they took on Formula 1, and these highlight packages get straight to the point. If you make the races shorter, the amount of material for the highlight packages drops, so the videos get shorter. Shorter videos means fewer ads in the middle. Fewer ads mean less money. YouTube 101. But as somebody else has pointed out here, someone called Mansel's Tash, would the younger generation watch a full Grand Prix if it was actually available? There's been a decline in the interest in cricket in England because all of it, and I mean all of it, is now behind a paywall. The Ashes used to be free on Channel 4. Now it's on Sky. The UEFA Champions League used to be free on ITV. Now, paywall. There have been attempts at creating faster versions of cricket for different TV audiences, but they don't seem to be working in England. 2020 cricket and what's it called, the 100, seem to be leaning towards baseball with limited innings and overs, but it doesn't seem to be helping. And snooker has done a similar thing at certain championships, shot clocks to speed the game up. Formula 1 has to create something to get the best of all the worlds. It needs a bit of column A and a bit of column B, with some of columns C, D, E, F and maybe G as well. But at the same time it might have to just swallow everything and go, actually, do we need to do anything? And that's the issue. How much of this is actually need? How much of it is want? But with the teams being against shorter races, it looks like that will be shelved at least. Because overly stupid gimmicks could end up turning people away from a sport in droves. Just look at NASCAR. NASCAR is the warning from history that Formula 1 needs to look towards. So then, a look at what's been happening with regards to sprint races and Formula 1 tabling an idea to potentially shorten the actual Grand Prix. Although the latter might not be happening, so, well, that's good, isn't it? If this has been interesting for you, then do like the video so I know a good job was done, and for more stuff from the channel, get subscribed and also get the bell on so you'll be among the first to be notified whenever a new video goes up. Massive thanks as ever go out to the mad lads over at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help keep the lights on around here or contribute to the picture purchasing piggy bank, then there'll be a link to Patreon in the description along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and any other bits and pieces you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks if you want to do a one and done donation, and memberships if you want to Patreon but without going over to Patreon. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.